There's so many different stages to grief. When we think of grief, we think of someone passing away. How does a single woman experience grief in relationship?
Yeah, so the grief we're talking about, what we call symbolic losses. And so it's not related to death. But many of us that are experiencing non-death related grief, the symbolic loss, we might be grieving the part of ourselves that identified as a wife. So we're grieving identity. There's so many of us that at a certain age and we had a vision of what our life would be like with a partner, and we are grieving the gap between what we envision and or even planned versus what we're actually experiencing. And some of us have boundaries that are so rigid, it keeps everybody and everything out. It actually is counterproductive to what it is we say we desire. Am I responding to what is happening in the here and the now, or am I responding to something that feels familiar?
Hey, family, welcome to another episode of The Lovelands. I am so excited that you're back. And if this is your first time, make sure to hit subscribe and to hit the notifications because you do not want to miss another episode. We drop live episodes every single week. I'm Coach Cass, your host, America's go-to love doctor. I'm a love coach and an author, and I'm just so excited to be here with you right now. So today I have my girl, right? This is my girl. This is my homie. You know, sometimes when you got those secret friends you try and keep in your pocket and don't let anybody else know. So I'm letting somebody out. Okay. Now y'all should feel very special. Okay. This is someone that I hold near and dear to my heart. I talk to her about 72 times a week. You know, we are all up in each other's business. So she is an expert that not only walks the walk, but talks the talk. She is someone that is absolutely helping people around this country, around this world. And I just love the way in which she shows up and lives her life. So I am giving you the opportunity to listen in to one of our private conversations. So this is Dr. Ajita Robinson. She is a trauma and grief therapist. She's a trauma disruptor. She's a mom. She is just the bomb. Okay. My biz bestie and a real bestie for real in real life. So welcome to the show. Dr. Ajita. How you doing, boo?
I am good. And thank you, as always, for just holding these conversations and your authenticity. So I'm always just thankful to just have conversations with you for sure.
Oh, thanks, boo. All right. So now, one thing I know is, well, we talk about this. I work with successful single women all day, every day. And so do you, right? So in terms of your therapy practice and what you've been seeing, I know that there's trauma triggers. I know there's grief that we don't talk about. I know there's healing to be done. So I'd love to start with, like just some of those trauma triggers, because I feel like all of us have been through something traumatic and we don't really understand how it shows up in our everyday dating lives.
Absolutely. And I see a lot of these triggers, and I think sometimes we call them, oh, it's my intuition, but it's actually informed by trauma that's been unreconciled or unresolved or unnamed. And so I always like to kind of start off by saying, let's just gauge and be mindful about, is that intuition, which is a thing, and listen to that. Trust yourself with yourself, but make sure that it is not a trigger that's actually telling the story. And I think one way of us being able to recognize that and understand it is really just being honest with ourselves. Am I responding to what is happening in the here and the now? Or am I responding to something that feels familiar? Right. And that shows up in our bodies. And it's like, oh, we're reacting, we're not responding. And so reflective pause can help us, right? Having self-awareness can help us. But I think more than anything, being honest about where we've been and what we might be bringing with us that actually shouldn't go on this next leg of the journey is one of the best things we can do for ourselves so that we can distinguish between intuition and trauma, right?
So you're
And how that
saying
may
that we got to unpack some of our baggage, right? So, but what about the cute Louis Vuitton bag? I can't I can't bring that with me, Dr. Ajita. We can't just put it in the car with us to this next relationship. You're saying to leave that behind. So what's a little bit of how we unpack that, right? Like, I'm not saying that you have to give away all your secrets, but it's just like, I feel that operating in trauma is something normal for the majority of
Mhm.
people. And we really
Yeah,
don't realize that, my gut told me this wasn't it, but it's really because he reminded you of your ex, Freddie and
that
Pablo.
absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely, right? And none of those things are wasted. And I'm not saying I never tell people to take their armor off because at the root of trauma is a lack of safety, a loss of safety, real or perceived, right? And it can
Mhm.
be emotional safety, physical safety, psychological safety, spiritual safety, right? That has been disrupted. And that can happen in intimate relationships. It can happen in families. It can happen with our parents. All of those relationships can contribute to that. And we bring that relationship related trauma into all of our experiences, good or bad. So here's the thing. And I love the example of, I love a good purse. Okay. But listen, think about this when we are planning for a trip.
Mm,
Now, when you pack that suitcase, you take into consideration the destination,
yeah.
right? So if I'm packing for Dubai, friend, it's hot almost all year round, right? It is hot.
Yeah.
And so I might pack clothing that's breathable. I may pack clothing that maybe has modest sleeves, right? I might pack some sundresses. I might pack sandals. I might even pack a bathing suit. Now, that's a totally different strategy based on what I need for that destination, as opposed to if I'm going skiing.
Mm.
It's gonna be cold, right? I'm gonna catch pneumonia if I pack that same set of clothes that I was taking to Dubai, right?
Right.
I'm gonna be really sick. I'm gonna be ill equipped. I'm not going
Mm.
to have what I need because I brought things that don't match the destination. That means I have to unpack
Yes.
so that I am prepared for what lies ahead, right?
Are you someone that goes to all the conferences? You get your CUs for your job. You're always up leveling in personal development. I'm going to tell you one thing. You need your CEUs in love. Join me for Wanted Woman Live, the ultimate non-conference, unconference experience, 3 days in sunny South Florida this fall. This is an experience where women come together from all over the country to be able to be poured into. All around love. How do you show up in love? How do you receive love? How do you just have fun with love? Join the sisterhood, an amazing experience created and curated just for you, the professional woman that desires more. Click the link below, wantedwomanlive.com.
Because now if I don't and I say, hey, you know what? I'm just gonna leave these clothes from Dubai and I'm gonna leave them in the suitcase. I'm just gonna bring everything with me. Now, what happens when you get to the airport? They say, Friend, this bag is overweight. It is over the limit. It is over capacity. Some of us are coming into new situations over capacity. We are full and empty, right? But we are full of the things that don't match where we're going. They might be mementos that reflect where we have been. And so be real with yourself. Does what I am carrying with me equip me for what it is I desire, what I want to experience, or does it literally just make my bag heavier? Be honest
Ooh,
about
just with a heavy bag out here dragging the bag through the
it.
airport.
And it's
Overpacked.
busting at the seams. And you done messed up your good bag, friend.
Good
Yes.
bag. Good bag. Can't even
Yes.
carry it. Asking other people to help you with the load when you could have just left some of those things behind. Unpacked it.
Yes. I love that analogy because think about it when
Mhm.
we're packing our toiletries, right? We again, especially I'm a carry-on girl. I have become a carry-on girl. I used to be an overpacker,
Boop,
okay?
boop.
So we have learned some new things, right?
Reformed.
But I found myself on my last trip because I didn't check. I didn't check in between the previous trip and the next trip. And
Mm.
y'all, I ran out of soap. Why is that relevant for this conversation? Because in between destinations, are you refilling and replenishing the things that allow you to show up fully where you are going? Again, this is the healing work. And so I'm never going to pretend that it's only about what happens in those moments when you are packing. And then when you arrive, there's something that we need to be mindful of in transition as we are in wait and in preparation for the thing that's on the other side. That's really where the work happens. That's where healing happens, right? Because there's nothing to distract us from ourselves. And so we might as well address what needs to be replenished or what needs to be refilled, right? There may be some things that you don't need. I had to take my winter makeup out of the bag because I need my summer makeup. Yes? And
Come
so
on.
I had to restock. What does that look like from a healing perspective? We have to
Hmm.
restock, replenish, but before we do that, we have to take inventory, right? That's the part that we fail to do and what keeps us in this trauma and triggered state because we're not taking inventory of what we possess. Make sense?
Ooh. Oh, that
Mm.
definitely makes sense because I messed up and left all my medication one trip because I just figured it was in my suitcase. Got dog sick and then was like, okay, let me get my bag. And it wasn't there. So also equipping ourselves with the tools, right? So it's like this is why we have the workshops. This is why we have the communities. This is why we have the therapists to be able to have the tools with us that we need, right? Oh my goodness, in between. To take the inventory. So if you've been through something, like the first step is actually recognizing, you know what? I've been through something. This
Mhm.
reminds me of just dating Andy, right? He'll say something and I'll say, "You know what? This reminds me of," and I'll be vulnerable enough to share like this isn't you, but this reminds me of my ex when he did this. And he'd be like, "Okay, it's like perspective, not judgment,
Yes.
but perspective. Doesn't mean that he needs to change,
Mhm.
but just perspective of how I'm receiving something because what
Yes.
I've been through."
And it's great to name that, right?
Mm.
When you say or do this, this is what it brings up for me. And
Mhm.
this is how it makes me feel, right? Because sometimes we are engaging from a place that's based on how we've had to respond or engage in a previous situation that in that situation kept us safe. But this situation isn't the same climate. We don't need those same skills, that same armor. So there are some things we actually get to retire, right? And so we just don't need it anymore. It doesn't mean it's not in our repertoire, right? We can put it right, look down in your bag, friend. So if you ever need to reach back in there and get it, it's there. But we don't need it at the surface. And we need to be able to be mindful of when we need it. What are the circumstances? What's different about this that tells me I don't need that armor, right? We're not still walking around in our puffer coats in June, right? We have switched out even the things that we have for our bodies to keep us safe in the new climate because the season has changed. And so we want to be just as mindful when we're in relationships that are different seasons, right? We're different versions of ourselves. And ideally, we have sought partners that allow us to be a different version, a higher version of ourselves, a version that is safe, seen, held, and loved. And we want to be able to filter that environment through a lens that's not riddled or colored by trauma, right?
Mm. Oh.
Mhm.
Okay. So, all right. Not to be riddled and colored by trauma, not to walk around like a landmine that's ready to be offended. And I feel like in today's day and age, we very easily get offended by
Yeah.
everything, right? So just in terms of dating, right? Just taking a little tangent here, but with women, I find that we get offended when a man will try you. You know what I mean? Essentially like, hey, you want to go back to my room? And it's like we're ready to slap people in the face. We're ready to do all these things. And I feel like a part of it is man's gonna try, And so it's just like, should we be offended? Or should we say, okay, well, you could try, but here is my boundary? Like, where is
Yeah.
the in between on that whole situation? I'm gonna just throw that out there.
Yeah. I think there's a both and. So I am never going to dishonor your feelings. What I want you to kind of be mindful of is you get to feel what you're experiencing, but you also it remains your problem if you don't communicate it, right?
Mm,
And I think sometimes we feel like I shouldn't have to because whatever that is shouldn't have happened. Well, but it did, right? And so now they're testing what is allowed, and you get to communicate what you're willing to receive, right? And so we're still responsible for us now based on that. I call it a carefrontation because we can correct and confront with kindness and with care, right? And then it's up to the person to be able to receive it and to correct their posture. And if they don't, again, govern yourself, right? And I think sometimes we internalize these experiences because we think that they are a reflection of us, right? A reflection of our value, a reflection of our worth. And they can be when we haven't identified what our boundaries are. And some of us, I have our boundaries, but they're not non-negotiable, friend. They are easily swayed. And that's where we get into a space where we feel like we constantly disappoint ourselves or we abandon our own standards because we get worried that no one will rise to the occasion. And so if it is a boundary, enforce it. And as what do the kids say? Stand on it, friend, right? It's there for a reason. Again, let's make sure that boundary, what is it designed to do? Because some of us have boundaries that are so rigid, it keeps everybody and everything out, right?
Yeah.
And so it's a boundary that's keeping us hidden. It actually is counterproductive to what it is we say we desire. And so I like to sit, if we're offended by everything, we likely are feeling overstimulated, right? And we're likely feeling vulnerable and unsafe. So let's get honest with ourselves about why that is. And when we realize that some of this is, again, we're responding to the old and not the new, and sometimes that new thing is masquerading itself, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, we have seen this before. Trust yourself there, but make sure it's coming from a place of grounded healing, right? And as opposed to the trauma related responses that its only job, those triggers are designed to keep you safe. Are you unsafe in that situation? And if we're not, assert yourself, assert the boundary, and be okay with moving accordingly. And that may mean withdrawing yourself from that conversation or from that interaction because they won't abide by your rules of engagement, right? But you need to know what they are and communicate them. Unfulfilled or uncommunicated expectations remain unfulfilled. Right.
Right.
And so I think those pieces are important that many of us who have experienced relationship trauma, we have received the message that our needs and our desires don't matter. And so we stop trusting ourselves to communicate them because it didn't do us any good in the previous relationship. No, you still need to practice communicating your needs for yourself and for others.
So moving into grief, because we spoke a bit about this, and there's so many different stages to grief. You know, when we think of grief, we think of someone passing away. But when we were talking, it was like relationship grief. So let's take it back to like, how does a single woman experience grief in relationship?
Hmm. Yeah, so the grief we're talking about is really what we call symbolic losses. And so it's not related to death. It could be triggered as a result of death. Because there are some folks that are single because their partner has died, right? But many of us that are experiencing non-death related grief, the symbolic loss, we might be grieving the part of ourselves that identified as a partner, as a wife, as a spouse. So we're grieving identity. There's so many of us that, again, are at a certain age and we had a vision of what our life would be like with a partner, right? With, whatever stability that brings, or even the vacations we had planned for this stage of our life. And we are grieving the gap between what we envision and or even planned, right? Versus what we're actually experiencing. We are also grieving the things that we navigated in order to that led us to becoming single, right? So some of us have some of that loss that we experienced because we were grieving being single in a relationship. There are so many single folks in relationships, right? Or at least they feel that way. And then people are grieving having to figure out how to date again, and figuring out how to date at this age and figuring out how to date, with this technology, or figuring out how to date, in this climate where it feels like, am I going to find my person? There feels like there's such a divide. And although that may not be our lived experience, social media will have you feeling that there's nothing out here, right?
Right.
There's nothing available. And so what I feel people are really grieving is a loss of hope. And that is one of the most difficult places to be, especially while dating, because dating requires that you have the hope, right? That you believe, that you trust that there is your person,
Mhm.
that you will be coupled in whatever way that means for you. And so to be simultaneously trying to date while also sitting and grieving the loss of hope around what dating could look like for you. And so if we're grieving that, we've already settled, right? Because we don't think that it can, like, maybe my expectations are too high. How many of us receive that message,
Right.
especially as high achieving women
Yeah.
are told that our expectations are unreasonable, right? That
Oh,
we're not going to find a partner that's going to tolerate us, as if that is what that's what we're trying to navigate. And so it can be a space where we're just grieving, right? We're grieving what we thought this would look like, and what we feel like we're up against. And then, you know what? The other piece I think that we are grieving is really feeling like we've let ourselves down. So we don't even trust us with us. Like,
right.
you talk a lot about like your picker being off. That's a real thing, and how it is such a hit to your self-esteem because we internalize the failure of previous relationships. We internalize what it means to be single at this age with whatever metrics we're using to determine relational success. We're experiencing the gap in that because we don't have the thing that we desire. And the messaging around it being our fault because we chose career and education or whatever these other things were, that it's our fault that we are where we are, which also means that we grieve the safe spaces to even be authentic about what we're experiencing, which is what makes this space that you've created so important.
Which is why I even have the Real Love Network, like a specific community where we support women through all of these emotions, a vulnerable space. So, question, right? So, what do you recommend in terms of, or do you have a framework around this process of grieving, right? Because I feel like these are the things that women bring to me day in and day out. Like, Coach Cass, I thought I would be further. I'm 43. I thought I would be in this great relationship, or my marriage fell apart and I thought it would be forever. I don't even know what this dating thing looks like. It's just so much sadness woven in there.
Mhm.
Like, they're still doing great in their business. They're still traveling the world. They got their girlfriends, but at the end of the night, it's just like, man, I thought I would be in a different place. Like, how do we heal through those emotions of grief?
Absolutely. So the acronym is HEAL. And so HEAL stands for H is heal, E is evaluate, right? A is affirm, and L is live. And we'll start with the H. So this part really requires us to prioritize our emotional healing. Just take the time to address it, process the grief, process the past, the unresolved trauma. We invest in every other aspect of our lives. Give your healing and your dating that same energy, right? We'll invest in $30,000 masterminds and leadership institutes and all the things. And yet our healing in learning to date again, learning to kind of, process that part of ourselves that is hurting, that is grieving, we put that to the back burner as unimportant because it feels intangible, right? And so I think this creating a foundation for new relationships, a healthier relationship, right, with self and with others really starts with us. And so I think that's our work. And that's an ongoing process that we continue even after we have found our person, right? The evaluate, name the past relationship and experiences,
Mm,
understand the patterns. I saw something online that said that is not your preference, that is your pattern, and it was so true when it
mhm.
comes to we find ourselves dating the same like different um people like that are the same versions of who we have dated. Right. And that becomes like, oh, I love the man with X, Y, and Z. And it's like, friend. But how is that working out for you?
It's
So
not.
understand the pattern. Exactly. It is not working. So I think it's important to understand the patterns, but learn the lessons. right? In a way that doesn't mean internalizing it, beating yourself up, but see it for what it is so that we can do something with it. This self reflection helps us in recognizing what you truly want in a partner and what you truly desire for yourself, right? Because so many of us have dated from a place of deficit. And we've heard of the 20, the 80-20 rule. Some of us in that next relationship, we said, I'm never finding X, Y, and Z. And so we dated the 20% because we were so afraid that we were going to repeat this component of a previous relationship that we forgot that the 80% was still important, right? Um, affirm your self-worth
Mm.
and trust in your intuition. Again, the intuition that is unencumbered by the trauma, which requires the act of healing. Rebuild your confidence in your ability to make good decisions for yourself. And it is totally fine to have a community where you can kind of say, hey, I need some accountability because my lens is clouded, right? And so being in spaces with people who will be genuine in helping you distinguish between your intuition and your trauma triggered responses. And I think far too often we feel shame about not knowing self, that we don't come in community and share that part because it's vulnerable and we think we should know better. And I just want to unpack that. Self-esteem is built in community, right? And so understand you can rebuild your self-esteem, your confidence, your ability to communicate what your needs are by being exposed and wrapped in community where that is the standard. It allows us to see in proximity and validate the realness and the goodness that what we want for ourselves can be real. It's tangible, it's acceptable, it's okay, right? Because we receive so many conflicting messages that we often need other folks to disrupt the noise, right? And then the L is to live in the moment, because we get on dates and we are already planning the wedding. Friend, we are so far ahead. That's how we miss the red flags, because we are so excited about being invited to the circus. Absolutely not. Right. And so enjoy the dating process. Dating should be fun. Dating should continue to inform you about what you like, what you don't like, what your non-negotiables are, where you have room and flexibility. But embracing that journey, it should be a space of curiosity and excitement. And when we don't allow ourselves to enjoy that moment because we are borrowing trouble from a future dream and a future hope, we miss what's right in front of us. And it feels like a waste of time because we weren't in the present moment. We had all these expectations about what this coffee date or this ice cream date or this dinner date was supposed to do, right?
Yeah.
That again, it robs us of the immediate joy. We could just acknowledge maybe this person is not a good fit for you, but what did you learn from that experience? I have met some very interesting people that, I'm like, we are not compatible, but they are people that I'm like, I'm so thankful that I had an opportunity to meet you and that I didn't miss the goodness of who you are because you weren't my person, and that I could only filter you through that lens, that I missed a God sent friend, right? Someone that I love dearly, right? That I now have a good sister-in-law, because you weren't my person. Um, and now I think I'd have wasted this good makeup and this good outfit because it didn't match the expectations I put on the experience, right? And so I think those are some things, some just kind of very light things we can do. I'm always going to recommend therapy for those of us who have trauma and cumulative trauma, repeated experiences that we are still bringing with us. So we have a safe space with support to unpack and process,
Oh,
right?
that's so good. That is so good. And everything you said, I see it every single day, right? Like, but Coach Cass, the date was so great and we didn't get to date number two. So you didn't get to date number two, right? Like, and we move on to the next one, right? Like, why are we building a house with someone we just met? Like, we can't hand over the key. You wouldn't hand your keys over to your own house for someone you just met. So
Mhm.
why are we building a new house with someone we just met? It just doesn't make any sense logically, right? And I
Yeah.
really feel like we kind of have this what I call rom-com itis, right? So we kind of feed into the romantic comedies and it's supposed to go like this, where some horrible beginning of a relationship turns into something magical by the end. I'm like, that, no, we don't. That's not the way it's supposed to go. Especially when you're a
Yeah.
woman of a certain age. If it starts out horrible, this ain't it. Okay, we not moving past the beginning of horrid. So I love that. And I am for the therapy, right? I hang out with my therapist every week. You know what I'm saying? It's a beautiful thing to be able to have a vulnerable
Mhm.
space where you could talk through your stuff. And, like what you was talking about, community. One of our Real Love Network members shared the other day that she had this epiphany just sitting in her doctor's office. She was just looking forward to something coming up, like with a guy that she was dating, but then she was looking forward to something else coming up with another guy she was dating. And she said, you know what? It was less about the men and more about me just living my life and looking forward to doing things. And that was a
Yeah.
shift for her, because before joining the network, it would be like, well, she's building a life with these men, and which one
Mhm.
was going to be the one, and all of this
Yeah.
extra pressure and weight to it. And it's just like, why are we putting so much pressure here when we could just live our lives and invite people along the way, and we see which one really deserves to be here. So yeah, when we start to deal with our trauma, it's the awareness for me that
Mhm.
is enlightening and life-changing. Like, wow, I
Yeah.
didn't even realize the impact of this thing that happened with my father, my cousin, my next door neighbor. One conversation. I find that it'd be like this one line that's stuck with you through time that forms your perspective on things, that when you recognize it, everything begins to shift. Listen, have you ever struggled when it comes to conversations on dates? Maybe a first date or even your 50th date. One thing I know is that we need to have more meaningful conversations. And that's why I created the Love Deck: 60 questions to ask before choosing the one, but really to deepen your conversations. So whether it's with that guy that you're dating or with your mom or your close girlfriends, what I know is we got to speak more to the heart of our people. Grab your Love Deck today. It's a great gift for others, and you could get it right now in our Amazon store. Pick up yours. One side is affirmations, the other side is dating conversations. Get yours today. Pick up the Love Deck.
Yeah. Part of this unpacking means that there are things that we need to unlearn.
Mm.
Unlearn about what it means to be in a relationship, unlearn what it means to be single, unlearn, some of these kind of gender norms that actually may not be compatible with the relationship that you desire. We may have to unlearn the things that we thought we needed to do and to be. Um, One of the things that, as you were talking, that popped up for me was about this enjoying, right? Her enjoying these experiences and it being less about the men. And I think sometimes we make this kind of false equivalency that if we are joyful in our singlehood, it means that we don't desire couplehood. It is so untrue, right? If you are experiencing a lack of unfulfillment in your personal life as an individual, if you don't enjoy you, you're going to bring all of that into this relationship and have expectations of the relationship that it was never designed to do. Right?
Right.
It cannot tolerate, it can't sustain unless it's a codependent and mesh relationship, which eventually isn't sustainable, right? Not in a
Right.
healthy way. And so a healthy, lasting relationship requires two people who are seeking wholeness in and of themselves. And so you bring that to the relationship. And so, Joy, I have been living my best good life as a single woman, but understand, I am totally aware of the ways in which I am looking forward to the joy being elevated when I am in couplehood, when I have my husband. Listen, understand, I am in expectation. I am
Mhm.
preparing myself for that while also not bypassing what it is that I need and I require, right? To sustain myself. Because what happens in couplehood is simple math. It's addition, friends, right?
Right.
If we come in the negative, what we got? We might be at baseline. I don't want to be at baseline, right? I want to add on too, friends. We want equally yoked, and that means that we have to cultivate the things that we desire. I want a patient and kind, compassionate partner. So guess what I have to be to myself first? Otherwise, I don't even know how to recognize it in someone else.
Right.
I don't even know what it looks like. I don't know what it feels like to be safe in a relationship if I can't cultivate that level of safety for myself. And it is not in conflict with wanting a partner, right? And I think that's something that we need to unpack because being a single woman has been weaponized against us for a really long time.
Right.
And it just needs to be disrupted. We have to participate in disrupting that singlehood cannot be joyful while seeking, while
Right.
preparing, while in that transition, right? That they're not in conflict with one another. They actually provide us with a solid foundation to enter healthy whole partnerships.
It's just
Because we're
annoying.
not seeking to replace lack, right?
Right. It's just annoying, right? Like society and
Mhm.
family and friends, like, like just how intrusive, right? So for my family is you need another kid, you need a dog. Like those are the two things that I need, right? This is what people tell me I need, right? So for the single family members, it's like, well, you need to be married, you need to be in relationship. Like it's just like something's wrong with you if you don't take this
Right.
logical next step. And so for me,
Yeah.
Andy calls me a rebel, but it's just like, who is you? Like, who is you to come
Right.
here and tell me, right? Now, as a married woman, I would definitely say on the other side of why I even do this work is like when you choose the right person, your life is enhanced. Now, the problem is we've been choosing the raggedy people and then we're mad. And then that's why we don't want to date or get married or whatever, because it's just like, you ain't been taught right of how to choose
Yeah.
the right
Yeah.
person for you, right? So now this joyful singlehood, listen, I used to turn up every Saturday night at this one reggae spot. Okay. You could find me there in my corner in VIP. I was there nothing but to hear the music. This is what I was doing in my singlehood. I was going to be out. I would travel, I would
Mhm.
hang out. And the thing is that I still do it. So I like that misnomer of you have to change you have to be confined, you're trapped. Like I feel like some people feel trapped if they get married, but I'm like, when you marry the right person, they get who you are. If you're honest and vulnerable with who you are, that I can still go hang out in my one reggae spot and stand up in the corner, and I can still go on my trip to Jamaica and it be okay. It's like, go ahead,
Yeah.
sis, you good. Right? It's all
Yes.
of that. Like you can transition from single to married in a healthy relationship. And yes, you do accommodate, you do compromise, but you do not have to change the core of who you are.
Yes. Absolutely. And I think that's so important because, there's so many women that are, that are on the other side that are married, with children, right? And the grief that I hear on that side is they're grieving who they used to be because they
Mm,
have lost that person, in service of being a mother and a wife. And it's not an either or, it's a both and. And everyone in the family thrives when you still get to remain intact because whole healthy love and marriage and relationships and motherhood and parenthood, whatever that looks like for you, doesn't require self-abandonment. And that is something that we have to unlearn because we watched likely our parents and grandparents self-abandon. The women abandoned themselves in service to others, self-sacrifice in ways that's the messaging we received about what it was supposed to look like. And many of us feel like rebels when we're pushing back against that, right? Because we also have to recognize they were likely doing it from a place of survival. And so if we don't understand the context in which the behavior or the norm was set and needed, we then adopted in a situation that doesn't require it. And now we're sitting with the resent, right? And the remnants of lost self. And
mm,
it is our job to keep us intact. And that also
right,
is why it's so important that you reveal your true and authentic self when dating so that you find a partner that truly likes you and not your representative, right?
right,
Who we have found we have to be in order to attract someone. You get to be you and still, right? Be in a relationship that's committed, be in a relationship with someone that's kind, that says, hey, I see you and I know you need this. And the relationship isn't threatened because you need to do this thing for you, right?
right.
I think that piece is so important. And for me, that's the thing that I am excited about. There's some expectation. There is a lot of hope and a lot of joy around. Because I know who I am as an individual, baby. I am a plus one. Do you hear me? I am a plus one all the way. And a plus two, depending on what day you catch me on, right? As far as the energy and the vibes and being able to add to someone's life in a meaningful
Mm,
way, I have
yeah.
been able to do that. So there's relationships right now that are whole and healthy, that are friendships. That's my relationship with myself, the relationship that I've had to rewire with my mother. Because again, all of those things inform who you are and you bring them with you into that next space. Are you bringing something with you that uplifts you, that adds to you? Or are you bringing something that's weighing you down? Right. And so again, it just brings us back to being able to be discerning and to unpacking and just really, I think, getting in alignment with our true self. And that may mean taking a look at us again and being in a community and spaces where we can truly be seen.
That's so good. That is so good. You really do see um women often sacrificing who they are, what they want, what they desire. And I feel like there's a season for everything, right? So after I had this
Mhm.
baby, I felt like it was a huge sacrifice, right? But that's because I wasn't myself, right? So the hormones and your body and all the things trying to figure out what do I do with this little person all the time. And essentially they need you, right? For all of the
Mhm.
things. So now we on year 7 with my daughter that now I'm just like, it's okay for me to do the mom's dinner once a month. Before, there used to be guilt there, right? Like,
Yes.
oh, I'm gonna miss bedtime. Like sis goes to bed every night. You know what I mean? It's just like,
Yeah.
the little things. Like we do these international trips with women, like, oh, what is it gonna be? But then I've balanced it out that I take my daughter on a trip right after, like, oh, let's look forward to whatever, because when mama comes back, we gonna do this. So, it's like you kind of learn your people, your family, and what makes them feel full from you. And so I do both, right? Like what fills my cup, these fabulous girls trip with nobody asking me what's to eat, right? And then I come back and I do my family time and we work it all out. So I think that there's all of
Yeah.
the balance of, okay, sometimes we do sacrifice as mothers, wives, girlfriends, and situations, but then it's just like, okay, but then how do I refill my cup in those situations? And does it
Mhm.
have to be to the detriment of who I
Yeah.
am? So there's a
Yeah.
delicate balance there.
Yeah. I think there's a difference between sacrifice, compromise, and self-abandonment, right?
Come on.
And the self-abandonment piece is where we're in not a good space because there's no room for us,
Mhm.
right? And so sacrifice and compromise are healthy, they're natural, and they should be equitable. Not in a way that we're keeping score, but there's some give and some take. There's some negotiation. There's room for everyone. And there's a unit perspective there. We all exist in this unit and we all get to sacrifice and compromise something for the greater good. And in this situation, this week, it may be that we are collectively sacrificing because mom needs, right? And it may be different. And so that's something we're not keeping score. We're just keeping balance. And I think that piece in relationship is so important because you may have it week or today and I don't. And it's like, all right, no problem. I got it. Right. And,
Right.
and I can help you with replenishing your cup. And sometimes that means not being responsible for anybody other than self for a couple of hours. All right, I can give my partner that because I know that if I'm in that space, my partner is going to show up for me as well because we both matter. Our needs matter in this situation. Nobody's in a space where they're having to abandon themselves and their needs because that is not how we operate as a unit. For me, that's the thing that you should be looking for, right? And making sure that do we speak that language? And if we don't, can we cultivate that language? I think
Right.
sometimes we walk away from things that can be cultivated, not in a build-a-bear situation, but we might put on a new outfit and enhance that a little bit, but there has to be something foundational already there because
Mhm.
we are always going to be curious. We should be continuing to be curious about our partner's needs because they change as the relationship evolves, right?
Yeah.
And I think that allows us to just continue to remain connected and check in with each other because what we need today might be different than what we need in a different season in our life and in our relationship. But we have to first discern that for ourselves. And I think being single gives you an opportunity to kind of be a little selfish with figuring out who you are and what you need. while you're also exploring being curious, being in connection and community with folks that may be your person, but nothing else, are sharing experiences with you. And I think that's one way of kind of navigating this space of transition and seeking that many of us are in.
Yeah, that is so good. That is so self-abandonment. Don't abandon yourself
Mm,
in this process. And in the process, figure out who you are and what you want and be honest about it. Ooh, it's so good. It's so good. So now with the grief, right? You as the grief expert, I've realized like regular grief. I've realized that grief is disrespectful, right? It just
mm,
kind of pops up whenever it feels like. It's just like I could see a helmet and a tear come down because it reminds me of my girlfriend who passed, who bought my baby her bicycle and all this stuff. You know, it's just like it just pops up whenever it feels like. So, how do you tell people to explain do you explain your grief to your partner or who you're dating? Like, I've had a couple of people pass and, it impacts me whenever. And this is how to
yeah.
support me. Like, how do you really broach those conversations, especially for people who have lost like parents, right? Like that's like a
Mhm.
tough one, right? Or maybe they might have a parent who it hasn't passed yet, but they're on their way, and it's just like all of that. And so like how do you tell people to really communicate that? Mm?
Mhm. Yeah, so I think that all of these things we get to do on our terms. And again, this is where intuition comes in play because not everyone, even as a grief therapist, I fundamentally believe and know that I still have to earn the right to your story. So have they been a safe and kind person to you? Hopefully, if you're spending time with them, you're being vulnerable. They have been. And so because not everything warrants that expression to depending on who they are, right?
Okay.
But let's assume that is true. Um, I teach people an acronym to help them not only express their own grief, but also to be better companions to others who are grieving. Um, A is acknowledge the grief. We're so afraid that if we bring it up, it's going to cause somebody else to like re-grieve. They've never forgotten. It's kind of playing in the background in the music, right? Background noise. Sometimes it's louder than others, but it's always present. It's lifelong, right? We just get used to carrying it in a way that we may not notice it, right? Um, and so acknowledging the grief, that is for you, is to be able to say, hey, like, this is what's happening for me right now. And if you're someone that's supporting someone that's grieving, being able to say, hey, I know that today, is a grief anniversary for you. And I just want to check in on you without expectations. You don't have to respond. I wanted you to know that I know that this may be a grief season for you. Right.
Mm.
I think that piece is important because we're so worried that we'll remind people of
Yeah.
what is for. And
That's
it's like they've never forgotten. They've never forgotten. And in fact, this leads us to the C, which is compassion. Compassionate companionship, I think, is so important to be compassionate towards yourself. And I say companion because you're on a journey. Again, it is lifelong. Grief revisits you, even in the midst of joy, right? When I was when I was finishing my certification program and I got this huge award, the first person I wanted to call was my grandfather. And it was in that moment that I was like, ugh, I, I can't call him, right? And that prompted, like, I'm so excited this amazing thing happened and it brought up grief. And so know that grief and joy sit by side. They're first cousins, right? The other piece around being a compassionate companion, it means that you let the person grieving set the pace. The same way that if you were, someone's jogging guide, the person you're supporting sets the pace of the jog. The same is the case with grief. And so oftentimes we just need somebody to hold space with us to let us tell the same story over again about our loved one or about what we're experiencing and to listen with compassion. And then the last one is tool or talk. I want you to listen for folks that seem to be stuck in their grief. You don't have to be a clinician to do this. You see them declining. They probably need something more than talking. They need the talking, but we probably want to connect them with someone that has the training and the tools to support them. And so normalizing that, right?
yeah.
I think the best thing that we can do is to mind our words. Again, the talk piece, because when people that are struggling with things always listen to the way that you talk about other folks that are experiencing what they might be, because you're telling them that you are in a safe place for them to talk, or a safe person for them to talk to, right?
Yeah.
And so giving them those kind of tools, or just normalizing those things. But these are things you can do for yourself, right? Acknowledge your grieving, be compassionate and kind. So don't beat yourself up about grieving again, crying again, being sad again, right?
Right.
But grief is actually not linear. We might look back around right to anger and denial. Acceptance isn't the goal of grief. We learn to move forward with it, and we
Mhm.
learn to find post the loss. And I think that's a common misconception, that we learn to find new joy in the new normal because the one prior to loss no longer exists. And oftentimes that's the thing we have the most difficult time grieving, is that our normal no longer exists. We have to create a new one without this person, or without whatever this non-symbolic or non-declared thing is, right? Now that I'm no longer married, now that I'm, empty nester, those are all losses that we have to learn to adjust to and to find new meaning, in the aftermath of. And so those are some things that I kind of recommend for folks that are navigating either side of grief.
That's good. That is so good. I definitely, what I have put a couple of grief anniversaries on the calendar, but it's like I'll talk to the person, and if they don't bring it up, I don't bring it up. So you're saying that it's cool to bring it up, because I'm like, I don't want to remind them if they forgot that today is that day, because then I don't want extra guilt that I brought it up, but it's like, oh, I wasn't even thinking about it. Like, so you're saying
Mhm.
it's okay to actually
Mhm.
bring it up.
It is okay, assuming the person is otherwise healthy, right? And I'll give this quick example. My grandmother has dementia. If she doesn't remember, I don't disrupt her reality,
Yeah,
right? But
yeah.
my mother, on the other hand, who's also grieving, um, the same loss as me, my grandfather and her firstborn son.
Mm,
My mother often doesn't remind me because she doesn't know if I'm having a good day, but she's never forgotten. Not a single day has gone by that she doesn't remember that her son is no longer here. And so what happens when I pop in and I say, "Hey, mama, I'm thinking about Darren today, and I'm thinking about your heart. I
mhm,
love you." She's like, "Oh my goodness. I'm really," and now I've created room for her to just say, "Thank you for thinking of me," right?
mhm.
I've opened up a conversation. And what she's doing is she's not sure whether or not I'm available for a conversation, so she didn't bring it up. And
Yeah,
so the person, not that my grief has been acute for a really long time regarding my brother, but I cannot imagine the loss of a child. And so in
yeah.
that situation, I always assume that um, I should be the one checking on her. So if I'm the person that's either not grieving or it's not as acute and I have the bandwidth,
Yeah.
bringing it up gives them allows them to be seen, like, because everyone else has moved on. How many
Ah,
people just moved on and you feel like I am still struggling around this day? So you being able to just say, "I see you and I'm there. I can be in this space with you," can be one of the most kind and compassionate things that you can do. It also normalizes that grief doesn't go away. Our ability to hold that which is no more evolves. And there are people who will travel that journey with us throughout time. That's what you bringing it up allows them to know. And that's always going to be worth it.
that is beautiful. You got me over here with whole tears, whole tears hanging out.
Yeah.
Whole
So give yourself permission, friend.
I
Give
love
yourself
that.
permission.
I love that. Oh my goodness. So, uh, uh, eh, yeah. Because there's just several people that I always remember, and I'm like, should I bring it up? And of course,
Mhm.
it'd be a mother and a son. I'm specifically thinking of our family who lost their son, and it's just like, of course she didn't forget, right?
Mm-mm.
She just doesn't say anything, and she's probably just
Yeah.
suffering in silence or sad in
Yeah.
silence when she might
For
just need an
finding
extra hug.
ways, yeah, to honor it on our own. But
Yeah.
what would it be like to be able to honor that with other folks that loved him too? That
Mm,
other folks that are like, we haven't forgotten him, you know? And although the conversation may start in tears, It often ends, with telling stories and other ways of keeping that love alive
Yeah.
because grief is always about love. Sometimes it's unrequited, but it's always about love. And so if we can find ways to situate that love in the present, it allows the grief to be that much lighter. And anytime we can have companionship on that, people who will come in to community with us and bear witness to that grief, because so many of us shy away because we don't know what to do if someone starts crying or it's like, oh my God, I upset them. No, you didn't. Many times they needed it. They were holding it in.
Mm.
They were holding it in because we keep it together for everyone else, right? Especially when no one's checking on us because they are expecting us to be over it. Because that's the message we get from society. But if we have someone, anyone that's able to say, hey, I remember, I remember them, and I remember that your heart is probably a little heavier today. But let's say it's not, right?
Mm.
I remember.
I remember.
I
I like
remember.
these words. This is what I need. I need the words. I
Mhm.
remember. Dot dot
Yeah.
dot. Ooh. Ooh, this is good. All right. So we've talked about triggers. We've talked about grief. Is there anything missing from this conversation that we did not cover, Dr. Ajita?
Mm. I really think we've talked a lot about this, but I think that even in the midst of seeking partnership, wholeness, relationship, joy in the present moment is your birthright. And I think if you remember that, it changes the way you navigate this in between.
My whole spirit. My birthright.
Mhm.
Come on, birthright. Oh, it is my birthright.
Yeah,
Oh, that is so
belongs to you.
beautiful. That is that is so beautiful, and I feel that so many are walking around in sadness, and they're waiting on someone else, right? To heal them. They're waiting on someone else to provide the love. They're literally waiting on a savior that isn't Jesus, somebody that's
Mm.
just walking on the earth, to fix everything for them, and it is just so powerful to understand that it's all within you. Every single piece of it is all within you, but we have to take the time to realize it and sit with that.
Mhm. Yes.
Oh, that's good. Whew. All right. Okay. I'm, I'm like, that's just so good. All right. So, in closing, I think one of the biggest things that I'm hearing is that our traumas need to be unpacked. They need to be dealt with. They need to be recognized. We need to be able to evaluate them. We need to acknowledge them. We need to live in the moment of where we are instead of just living in our past traumas. We got to put them to the side. And sometimes they sneak back in the bag. It's like they jump in like a critter that didn't need to be there. And we need to say, no, no, it's time to exterminate. We got to go ahead and get rid of you. But also the vulnerability piece, um, to share what we're going through, I think is like a whole nother level. And depending on the trauma that you've been through, you may be open to that or not. So I think the first part of what you're saying is really being vulnerable with ourselves.
Yes.
Yeah. And the vulnerability piece, we practice it in the Real Love Network all day, every day, at nauseum, where ladies like, Coach Cass, why do you want me to share this? I'm like, because if you don't have a safe space to share it here, like, you can't just turn a light switch on tomorrow to say I'm vulnerable. It doesn't work.
Mhm.
And sometimes we verbally vomit or trauma dump on people, and that's not
Yeah.
good either, right? And you're getting to know people. So it's everything is in stages, and the grief of where I should be by now goes across our entire lives. And if we just took a step back and say, you know what? I am good where I am right now, a whole new world can open up of this joy that is our birthright. Mm, mm. I just want to say thank you so much, Dr. Ajita, for joining us here on the show. And where can people follow you, find you, get your book, all the things?
Yes. So I am Dr. Ajita on all social media platforms. And my book is available on Amazon. It's called The Gift of Grief, and you also can find it at ajitarobinson.com. Yeah, I'd love to be connected and continue the conversation in any way that's meaningful.
Oh, that is just so awesome. I love you. But I'm just
Yes.
happy, you gave me my own tools. I'm excited. This is what happens when you get your own tools, right, guys? You're like, ooh, I got something good. Wait, hold on. Let me put that right in here for my auntie and then for my mama. You know what I mean? Like, I got something good because grief is just something that we deal with every day. And it's always a hush hush taboo situation. Like, we don't talk about
Yeah.
it, like, just like sex, right? Like, things in society that we really don't talk about is right there, right? Grief and sex go together. It's just like that. Nobody wants to talk about it.
Mhm.
And so for me,
And we're all experiencing it. Yeah.
yes. Well, not everybody's experiencing the sex part, but that's another episode. But it's like these are the questions and the things that come up in our minds, and sometimes we don't even have the words to ask the question. So I pray that for those who are listening in, you got the words for the question and you got the words for the answer, or at least start the journey to what it is that you need to live as a wanted woman. Women achieving new triumphs every day, understanding what you want. Because in order to understand what you want, you got to do this work continuously. It really doesn't end because if you feel like, oh, I know everything already, I feel like there's so much more that you could be for your +1 or your +2. You could be doing so much more to take your life to another level. So I just want to say thank you for listening in to another episode of The Love Lens. Make sure that you hit subscribe, that you hit notifications, that you make sure that you tell all your friends, share this episode. Follow us on the social media. Don't be a stranger or a menace to society. Keep loving, keep laughing, keep living. Until next time, bye, y'all.
So we are trying out the love deck. So let's just do random. I like this one. I like that. That one I
Wanted Woman Love Deck. Y'all, this about to be good. So we played with these ones already and they were good. They was like right on the money. They was good. On one side, it has affirmations. On the other side, it has like a question. So we got to answer the question. So he gonna read the affirmation part, and then on the other side, it's gonna have a question.
The affirmation part is I embrace. Oh, wow.
That's a good one.
I have these wanted woman cards from Coach Cass, our good dear friend, and she made these wanted woman cards. And I am a wanted woman by you.
Let's get that right.
Right, yeah. Right. So we're gonna read, it's like a little question and answer.
Okay.
All right, so this is one of her cards. It says, what is your favorite family tradition?
Our family tradition, our favorite family tradition is to go to church on Sunday.
That's true.
What is your favorite dance move?
My favorite, like right now, my favorite dance move?
Yeah.
All right.
Let's see. Show me what you're working with.
All right, let me show you. All right. Ow. Ow. Yeah.
That is the favorite one.
Ah, that's okay. You've been seeing this forever. Ow. So yeah, you probably have. Yeah, that was the move that caught your attention. What you talking about?